I was looking at some Jalen Reagor numbers yesterday, and they're not encouraging. I mean, 396 receiving yards. They rank 26 out of 37 first-round picks, wide receivers in the past 10 drafts, not including this year. And the 11 players with fewer, there's a lot of bust on that list. So it's really not the best company to be in. Now you can say, there were things last year that the injuries, bad quarterback play, and you account for all that for sure. And I'm not saying Jalen Reagor can't get better, but I'm saying it can't just be assumed that he's definitely going to get better just because he's a first-round pick. And also,
Mac guys here on Bird 365, the final show of not only the week, because we're off tomorrow, but the month, because we're going to be off Monday, which is Memorial Day as well, taking a long weekend to give nod our heads and acknowledge the losses that we've suffered as a country before with our great soldiers who are out there protecting our land. So we'll take a lengthy Memorial Day weekend and enjoy it, but we'll come back with a vengeance on Tuesday when we get that much closer to the start of a season, talking about the Eagles off season. And before you know it, camp getting here and a season underway. We're joined by one of our favorite guests who does a phenomenal job covering the Birds day in and day out for his website, Bleeding Green Nation, their editor-in-chief and chief cook and bottle washer as well. Brandon Lee Gowton joins us here on Birds 365. BLG, how you be?
Doing good, Jody. Doing good, John. Nice to see you guys.
Good to see you, BLG. Now, every time I say that, are you a wrestling guy? Jody and I are wrestling guys. Like one day I want you to say BLG and do it like Rob Van Dam. So I want you to do that at practice. And you're a viral video star. So that's where I want to start as well. Because John Clark caught you with your new best friend, Nick Sirianni. I was at the end of that line right next to Clark. What the heck was he saying to you?
Yeah, so Nick Sirianni comes up to me on Tuesday, and I think he originally was like, hey, I don't think I got your name last time. He introduced himself to all of us at Rookie Minicamp, but I don't think I said my name because the mask was on, the music was playing. And he was going by quickly. I felt weird saying it. Like I don't think he was going to remember. Yeah. So this time, I thought the opportunity was there, and I felt bad last time because he was doing the fist pounds, and I feel like I missed an opportunity to throw out paper and beat him and show him how competitive I am. So I did it this time, and he was super confused. I think he might have been like terrified of what I was doing. And I had to explain it to him. But he's like, oh, okay. He got it.
That might have been the first rock, paper, scissors match he won by disqualification. That's the thing. He's competitive, but evidently never wins these damn things.
He beat BLG. That's something he'll be able to tell his grandkids about someday. He'll be bragging about it 40 years from now. Rock, paper, scissors aside, and your personal interaction with the coach. I know it's just a couple of minutes you guys get to spend at practice, but do you like the way he's running the ship? First impressions are important. The players seem to hop on board and say the right things about the fact that this is going to be a different and maybe an improved way of doing things with the new coaching staff. What's been your read on the new Eagle coaching staff, starting at the top with Nick Sirianni?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk from the players, about energy. And I think we've seen that in the limited portions of practice that we've been able to see. I also think I've noticed Nick Sirianni really coach players in terms of going up to them and individually and kind of instructing them, hey, here's what you kind of need to do better. Here's what you can do differently on this certain play. So really kind of a hands-on approach. I've noticed that. I've noticed him spend a lot of time with the receiver position, which I guess shouldn't be a surprise given his background coaching that position. And he's going to be working with the offense, of course. So those are the kind of the biggest things I've watched. I know teaching, I think, is a big emphasis from this new coaching staff. I think that's kind of where the organization feels like things may have gone astray a little bit with Doug Peterson's staff in terms of player development. So I think that's the big emphasis here.
One of those players we were just talking about before you came on, Brandon, is Jalen Reagor. We know the injuries he had in his rookie season started in training camp, and I think that set him back a little bit. And then I do think there was an issue of what is this guy? And one of the things I brought up with Jody is when you're picked in the first round, people expect a number one wide receiver. I don't think he's that guy. But I think Devontae Smith could really help him, maybe more than anybody else on this team, other than the obvious Jalen Hurts. As a compliment, I think he can really do some nice things. And he talked about playing in the slot before backtracking a little bit when we talked to him. Do you see that utilization? Sort of the guy who starts and if they're 12 personnel, he starts outside and then moves into the slot.
It's funny. I mean, everyone's brought it up already, but you take Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson, and then you put Jalen Reagor in the slot. I don't think he's going to be there full time. I think that's something they'll mix in a little bit more, and it's something he did last year. I think he was in like the 20% range of playing in the slot. Yeah, so it's not like he's never. Yeah, it's not like he's never done it before. But I mean, I was looking at some Jalen Reagor numbers yesterday, and they're not encouraging. I mean, 396 receiving yards. They rank 26 out of 37 first-round picks. Wide receivers in the past 10 drafts, not including this year. And the 11 players with fewer, there's a lot of bust on that list. So it's really not the best company to be in. Now you can say, there were things last year that the injuries, bad quarterback play, and you account for all that for sure. And I'm not saying Jalen Reagor can't get better, but I'm saying it can't just be assumed that he's definitely going to get better just because he's a first-round pick. And also, from Matt Harmon, I saw that he had Jalen Reagor at just a 40.8% success rate versus man coverage last year, and that is the second worst rate he's ever charted. So there's some really concerning numbers here.
That is not a positive.
that is scary. And here's where I don't, and it's John and I have a running joke here, Brandon. I don't know if you're privy to it, but I'm a big Greg Ward fan and think that he needs to be beat out for the job that he's doing in the slot. I know his average yards per catch stinks, but I will attribute that more to the system and the quarterbacks than put it on Greg Ward's plate. And we'll see what he does this year. I think he's going to be improved. But if Jalen Reagor is going to be the guy who's going to displace him in the slot, wasn't the whole idea of drafting Jalen Reagor because of his speed? And isn't it much easier to use your speed effectively on the outside than it is on the inside? Wasn't the hopeful upside, best of all cases, the fact that he was going to be Tyreek Hill-like here in Philadelphia and do what Hill does for the Kansas City Chiefs, just outrun people? Well, you don't do that out of the slot. If he is going to achieve what they originally thought the upside potential was, he's got to be outside rather than inside, does he not?
I don't necessarily agree with that, Jody. I think one of the things we saw from a positive standpoint in Jalen Reagor last year is he's really good on slant routes. So maybe you put him in there, and maybe he has some success with that. He's strong. He's not the biggest guy. Another thing is, I think it's a change of pace thing. Again, it's not like Jalen Reagor full-time slot receiver. I think if you're looking for a vertical element in the slot, then you put him there. And that's what Greg Ward will never give you. Like, for as much as, he's not going to ever take the top off. He just doesn't have that kind of ability. So, again, change of pace guy in the slot there, rotational guy. I think John touched on it earlier where Jalen Reagor is really never going to be a volume receiver for this offense, and that's fine. He doesn't have to be if they have another one, and presumably, hopefully, for the Eagles' sake, Devontae Smith will be that guy, and that does take the pressure off of Reagor. But still, he's going to need to show up when his number is called, and he has a lot to prove.
Speaking about stretching the field, Brandon, I was watching the receivers the other day, and I thought it was interesting. The one guy, because it was Smith and Reagor started out as the ones, and that was Fulgham, which isn't surprising outside. But the other one was Quez Watkins. He was running number 2 behind Jalen Reagor on what would be the Z side. So this coaching staff seems to, at least, it doesn't mean much on May 25th, but they've defaulted there to start. We all saw left tackle. They defaulted to Jordan Mailata. That's interesting. You got to start somewhere. And it seems to me they're starting like Quez Watkins is ahead of John Hightower and JJ and everybody else on the outside. Do you think he can develop into that kind of, fourth receiver complement to make this team a little bit better?
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. I mean, we saw Watkins, move ahead of Hightower during the season last year, which is a
Yeah.
little interesting because Hightower was playing a lot early on, and then it seemed like he kind of got in the doghouse basically, and then they really gave Watkins a chance at the end of the year. And I think there's something to that. I mean, look, John Hightower, I think is going to be 25 this season. And he's only in the second season. It's
Yeah.
on the older side for second-year player. Whereas Watkins, I believe he was like the youngest or one of the couple youngest players on the roster last year. So I think Quez with him, like it was always kind of more of a he needs some time to develop here, and he might have the higher upside. So I think it's kind of just a matter of getting him in here and seeing what he can do this offseason, giving him that opportunity to actually do that. I noticed in addition to what you're saying there, John, it was him, meaning Quez Watkins, it was Jalen Rager, and it was Devontae Smith who were working with the running backs for a little bit early on in practice. Reverses, sweeps, that kind of stuff. So it seems like there's definitely kind of like a plan to get him touches, even if it's not just at receiver.
John alluded to it, so I'll go there full time since we're analyzing the order of the reps the guys got in practice. At the left tackle, Jordan Mailata first, Andre Dillard second. It is a first-round pick rather than a seventh-round pick. But to these coaches, new coaching staff, that shouldn't really mean anything because they're getting their first look at these guys. Of course, they looked at film during the offseason, but their first live on eyeball look at these guys. I hope it's a competition. The coaches continue to beat down on that it's all about competition. That's one of his tenets that he runs his football life by. Who's going to win that competition at left tackle, as per Brandon Lee Gowton?
I think it's going to be Jordan Mailata. I think the organization, going into last season, I mean, I think people forget there was a plan to sign Jason Peters before Brandon Brooks got hurt. Like that was out there before the Brandon Brooks injury. So I don't know, it was 100% that Andre Dillard was starting last year. And he wasn't going to get replaced by Jason Peters at some point. So I think, there's this concern about Andre Dillard here. I think people kind of romanticize his rookie season a little bit in terms of his starts at left tackle, and they kind of just too easily forgive the struggles at right tackle. I think he also struggled at left tackle. I also think the mentality he showed in terms of like kind of just being already defeated before he ever even took the field at right tackle is a concern. And I just wonder what this team really feels about Andre Dillard. I don't think they're high on him. I think Mailata will get that job. He's younger too, as I kind of talked about age earlier before with Hightower and Watkins. Mailata's a couple years younger than Dillard. I think he's a higher upside. I think he's a better player. I think there's a higher ceiling there. And with Andre Dillard, I kind of wonder what his value is to this team if he's not starting. Because like I just said, you're not counting on him to be the swing tackle because you're pretty confident he can't play right tackle. And, with the Eagles bringing in LaRaven Clark recently, I don't necessarily think that means he's guaranteed to make the roster. But it kind of makes me wonder, if they're kind of preparing for life without Andre Dillard and kind of moving him at some point because I don't know what value he has as his backup.
That was my question to you, Brandon, when you went down that route. I mean, you can't have a backup that just plays left tackle. I mean, that's not how it works in the NFL. You have to be a swing tackle. You have to have some position versatility. If he can't play right tackle, he's probably not going to move inside the guard. So how do you build up that value? There's one thing. There's a lot of teams in this league that need offensive line help. I mean, everybody's looking for offensive line help, and he still has that first-round tag on him. So you could probably talk somebody into maybe giving you a cornerback for Andre Dillard. Is that how he's planned to get another body at that position?
Well, that would be nice. They need one, right? They need one of those. Yeah. They don't have much of that position. I can't imagine Andre Dillard has much value. Maybe you would have to really like trade him and a pick for something to get a worthwhile cornerback. Otherwise, I think you're looking at day 3 pick or day 3 pick equivalent of a cornerback or whoever you would get for him. I can't imagine his value is very high. I think teams are aware that the Eagles don't feel amazing about him. I mean, if you're seeing Jordan Mailata get reps ahead of him, that tells you more too. But like you said, I mean, there's always going to be a demand for offensive linemen. So I imagine he has more than zero value, but I just can't imagine it's too high. And I wonder if the Eagles might just have to kind of take the loss on that at some point and feel like, hey, let's get pennies on the dollar instead of getting nothing at all and having to maybe cut him eventually.
Real quick follow-up on that. Sorry, Jody. Can you rehab a player during the preseason? In other words, give him a ton of preseason snaps and say, look, the guy's playing pretty well. You need a left tackle. Why not roll the dice?
I mean, maybe a little bit. Maybe it helps his value a little. I just can't imagine Andre Dillard going up against second stringers is going to suddenly convince people that everything is good and he's fixed. Maybe it's one thing if he's starting in the preseason, but then if he's starting in the preseason, he's probably starting for your team, and I don't think that's the case.
Here's why I'm doubting this. I think Andre Dillard's going to be here, and Mailata could kill it throughout all of the preseason and actually win the job as per competition. The Eagles did eat some crow and quote unquote take a loss when they did what they did with their quarterback this offseason. I don't think they really wanted to do it. I think they realized that they had to do it, and they got the best deal that they could. But that was because Carson Wentz forced his way out of town, that it became public knowledge that Carson Wentz didn't want to be here anymore. And the Eagles could go, hey, what can we tell you? Carson decided to quit on us. I don't think Andre Dillard's going to do that. So if they move Andre Dillard for a day 3 pick, just 2 years after trading up in the first round to get him, you're going to have to get an awfully big spatula to get all that egg off your face, Howie Roseman. I don't know that he's going to be willing to do that. I think they'd rather say, hey, the worst case scenario, we keep him here. Mailata gets hurt week 1. We've still got him to plug in, be ready to go, rather than we trade him and now we put a lesser guy in at the left tackle position. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think he's going to be here. Even if he is either not given the job and the coaching staff decides to go with Mailata, or if he's beaten out for the job that Mailata actually earns it and dominates in the preseason, I think Andre Dillard's going to be the backup left tackle.
It's possible from the standpoint of they want to keep a bunch of offensive linemen. That's not something they're a deal breaker for them in terms of keeping, let's say, 10 a lot of bodies. I remember Chance Warmack a couple of years ago was on the roster, and he could only really play one guard, but really probably only ideally you'd maybe want him just at right guard. So it's not impossible that they just keep him around and they're not willing to kind of bite the bullet on that. But I'm saying in terms of what could be the best move, because his value could only go down. If he's just sitting on the bench, then he doesn't play at all, and then I don't know how his value is going up. So maybe.
Yeah, good point, Brandon. I don't think Chance could play any position, I would argue. But
shot on Chance Warmack.
No, by the way, full disclosure.
Called for.
Coming out of the draft, another Alabama guy, by the way. We're going to talk Alabama football in hour 2. But I thought Chance Warmack was going to be great coming out of college. So I screwed that one up mightily. But yeah, they kept him for some bizarre reason for a lengthy period of time. I do want to shift to the defensive side of the ball. We kind of alluded to cornerback. When we were there, Brandon, Darius Slay wasn't there. He's back, so everybody doesn't have to panic. But it was interesting to see, no Darius Slay out there. And the defense is on the far field and, trying to squint. I had my binoculars to see. They're in the gray jerseys. You can't see the numbers.
Yeah.
Avonte Maddox is working with the safeties and the corners. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? But I'm looking at it and saying, boy, Avonte Maddox is the best cornerback on this team without Darius Slay. How scary is that?
Yeah, it's an issue. I mean, look, this is a roster that had a lot of issues last year, and they weren't very good, and there's a lot of work to be done here. I mean, and even Darius Slay, didn't have the best year last year. I mean, especially for the expectation and the contract. I mean, they made him at the time that Darius Slay signed his contract extension. He was the highest paid cornerback in the NFL, and you did not get that kind of player last season. So it's a big concern, and it's weird because what they haven't done in terms of making moves at that position, almost it's like Avonte Maddox feels like the starter, but it's by default because who else is it? Is it Craig James? Okay. I mean, that doesn't seem very tenable. So it's a big hole. It feels like they have to do something at this position in terms of signing someone. People have obviously brought up Steven Nelson. Garyon Conley still out there. I don't know if the injury thing with him is kind of just even making him not a viable option, but it feels like they have to add someone here at some point.
So Josiah Scott wasn't it for you?
I mean, I think he can contribute in the slot. I think Josiah Scott is basically the new strap, Crayvon LeBlanc, in terms of a backup nickel cornerback.
Except he could run. He does. Yeah, I think he ran a 4.39 or something. But it is interesting because I think they're fine in the slot. because I think Avante can play in the slot. I think Scott can play in the slot. I think Zach McPherson. I think he's a slot corner. The problem is the other outside corner position opposite Slay. And there, boy, I mean, are they expecting too much out of Jonathan Gannon and saying, okay, Jonathan, you're a star. You're a rising star in this business. Go make something out of this.
Yeah, I think that's the plan and it's not insane just because when you look at the track record, I think Jonathan Gannon typically has gotten more out of less with his cornerbacks, or maybe it's recency bias. But I look at last year when a lot of people thought Xavier Rhodes was like done and bad after the Vikings cut him. And even like a guy like TJ Carey, who's kind of more of like a journeyman and was never really like, some great starter, but like he had a pretty decent year for the Colts and he re-signed there. And I think he's been able to do more with less a corner. And I think you're talking about, and we don't know exactly what his defense is going to be, but you're talking about, cover two corners, probably not the position you kind of need to invest the most resources in terms of guys you can kind of find a little bit more easier. So I think there's some truth to that in terms of you can get more out of less, but you still need like a baseline of competency here. And they're just not even approaching that right now.
All right, BLG, I'm going to put you to the test, see your coaching, handicapping ability here. Eagles made 2 picks last year on defense, one a little higher than the other, and both of them contributed in smallish ways last year. And you would think just naturally in year number 2, you're going to be able to see more out of them, but it's no longer the Jim Schwartz defense. It is the Jonathan Gannon defense. So you have to try and factor in how these guys are going to fit and the rest of the roster. Give me your read on which one do you think will actually be more of a defensive contributor this year, Kevon Wallace or Davion Taylor? Which is going to be the guy who's going to fit well in the Gannon system and be able to fight his way onto the field?
I'm going to go with Wallace just because, I still think Davion Taylor has much to prove in terms of being ready to contribute to a football team and having the experience and understanding and everything to do that. I think he looked lost when we saw him out there on the field, which isn't, a shock given his lack of experience. But I think with Wallace, I'm kind of interested to see how he kind of fits into the nickel picture too, because that's, for as much as we kind of label him a safety, that's something he did at Clemson. And I think that's kind of one of the strengths is kind of being able to move down, obviously, nickel corner / box safety. So I think he could have some kind of sub package role. Obviously, you're not going to play him like up high on the back end a ton, but I think he could have he could be a role player for this defense. Whereas Davion Taylor, I think best case for him is really he's kind of just realistically contributing on special teams.
One thing defensively I found interesting at practice, Brandon, was for a period there, I think it was Joe Osman, it was Patrick Johnson, and Jannard Avery. They moved off to the side. They were working away from the other linebackers and sort of whatever you want to call it, a stand-up rusher role. I think that would be Ryan Kerrigan as the season gets closer. But it does seem like they're going to have that stand-up rusher role. And people talk about aggression all the time. I'm going to throw out this term because I think it was Jamon Brown, the great Jamon Brown era. But he had a great quote about, because he played for Sean McVay, and he said, it's the illusion of complexity. It's really simple. His offense is unbelievably simple. I think that's what you're going to get with Gannon. I think you're going to get a more simple defense, but there's going to be this illusion of complexity, and that stand-up rusher is going to be a part of it. Am I on to something? Then it's going to be cover 2, cover 3 on the back end.
Yeah, that's something he talked about with us, right? Is the concept of creating pressure before the snap as opposed to after the snap, and kind of getting into the quarterback's mind and kind of confusing them before the ball even gets to him. So yeah, I definitely think there's something to that. I think it's interesting because look, we know I don't think we're expecting Jannard Avery or Patrick Johnson or Joe Osman to suddenly be off-ball linebackers, and like running with tight ends. I don't think anyone's expecting to see that. But it is interesting to see how it's kind of a different role. It seems like they have something. Like Jonathan Gannon has a plan. He has some specific things in mind. For as much as he might say, he might not have a scheme, he does seem to have certain ideas in mind here, and that's one of the interesting wrinkles I think we could see this year, like you're alluding to there. That kind of interesting linebacker role.
Let me ask you about a player here who's kind of on a make or break it year for the Philadelphia Eagles. Kind of like our buddy at left tackle that we've already talked about today. Some people got turned off by the fact that Andre Dillard never seemed to want to get into a fight with Jason Peters and take the job from him, or that if his job is up for grabs, that he's going to be the guy who's going to get the job done and punch somebody in the face if he has to. I feel the same way about Derek Barnett. Since the time that he was drafted, 2 Eagle first-round draft picks, neither one of which has really dazzled me at any point in their Eagle career. Well, the Eagles went out and got a guy like Ryan Kerrigan who's going to come in, and if he's better than Derek Barnett, he's going to play over Derek Barnett, at least my opinion, and we'll see how the coaches handle it. But that's a serious challenge to Derek Barnett. The same way there have been serious challenges to Andre Dillard since he was drafted number 1. Is Derek Barnett going to surge with that challenge, or is he going to shrink from that challenge?
I would bet on surge. I think Derek Barnett is mild-mannered and he might be kind of quiet, but I don't think he lacks toughness at all. You know, it's something Jim Schwartz has praised him for and talked about how his daughters wore Derek Barnett's jerseys because they're big fans of him. But that's an interesting dynamic too, because Schwartz is no longer here. I still think the organization has hopes for Derek Barnett, given that he was this GM's first-round pick, and I think they'd very much like to be in a position to sign him to a long-term deal if it's justified. So I still feel like Barnett's going to be playing over Kerrigan, and I feel like Kerrigan, ideally, you're going to keep him, on a limited workload anyway to kind of get the most out of him, as opposed to, giving him this full slate, and maybe he doesn't have it by the end of the season. But, it is a legitimate, threat here that if Barnett isn't producing with all the opportunities getting early on in the year, and Kerrigan is, then sure, maybe it kind of the scale kind of tips there. But I think for now, Barnett's still ahead, and I think Kerrigan's limited to more of a rotational role as that third guy behind Brandon Graham and Derek Barnett.
Continuing on the Kerrigan point there, Brandon, I don't think you can criticize the Eagles for that signing. I mean, you look at the cap number, the guy fell in their lap. I think if they signed him for $7-8 million, then you could have criticized him. But he is still a good player. He's still a proven player. I think you're right. He's got to be on a pitch count at this stage of his career. But you have Derek Barnett entering a contract year. So is Josh Sweat, by the way. Mm-hmm. And we all know this is a transition. The owner himself called it a transition. So isn't it more important to learn if Derek Barnett's going to be the future, if Josh Sweat's going to be the future, but Ryan Kerrigan's too good to not play? Is that some weird kind of counterintuitive thing that they've gotten themselves into?
I think that's where you can look at, again, let me be clear up front. I think the Ryan Kerrigan signing is a one to make. Like, they should have made it. It's good, especially the value and everything. But to your point about playing time and everything, I mean, I think if you're looking for a criticism of the signing, it's that, Howie Roseman, every offseason, what's he talk about? We need to get younger. We need to get younger. Well, Howie Roseman, here are your free agent signings this season. You signed Ryan Kerrigan in his age 33 season, Joe Flacco in his age 36 season, Anthony Harris in his age 30 season, Andrew Adams in his age 29 season, and then Eric Wilson his age 27 season. So you didn't actually really add a lot of youth in free agency. And I know that's, you're not going to get guys who are 22 and 23. That's how the draft works, not how free agency works. But still, point being, like, they didn't really make the team super younger. And to me, I think a frustrating point would be if the Eagles are kind of, let's say they're out of it, they're 4-10 late in the season, and we're seeing Kerrigan playing ahead. We're seeing Kerrigan get a lot of playing time, and then Teron Jackson isn't getting on the field. And some of these younger guys who you're kind of trying to evaluate in a year where, admittedly, the owner is saying, we're in a transition. We're not really necessarily all in this year, to not be able to get some of those young guys playing time at the expense of someone like Kerrigan, who isn't going to be a long-term piece here. That's where I kind of start to wonder, if things could get disappointing down the road.
BLG, we've had you on for almost half an hour, and we haven't mentioned the Eagles quarterback position once. Here's one of the interesting things about where the Eagles are at quarterback with Jalen Hurts right now. We're not going to be able to judge him till preseason games, and even at that, people put as much emphasis on it as they think it is necessary. We're probably not going to really be able to judge him until the regular season is underway. We're looking for things that we can judge. He's a good leader. His teammates like him. He works hard. So they're not going to be any reading between the lines with this guy. He's checking all those boxes. Can we wait until like week 3 or week 4 and have a decent sample size to go, oh, okay, Jalen Hurts. Yeah, this is our guy. Or, oh, shoot, Jalen Hurts. You got 12 more weeks to get through. Then we got to go find our next quarterback. How are we going to get through all this time?
Well, I think the things you're touching on there are not to be glossed over, because I think with the previous quarterback here, there were some issues in that regard and were contributing factors into the demise of Mr. Carson Wentz. So I think for Jalen Hurts to have those things is important. Now, though, like you're saying, can he play? Because if he can't play and he has all those things, then he's a great backup or a good backup, but he's not, a starter in the league. And I think it's pretty clear that the Eagles have reservations about Jalen Hurts. I don't want to say that they don't have any hope for him, but I don't think they're nearly putting all their eggs in his basket, so to speak. So he's a lot to prove. And I think Hurts deserves a chance. I think you give him, a new coaching staff, an offseason, a full offseason, not a COVID shortened offseason, like a full offseason. And you consider, how young he is and how he has this leadership and potential. And I think there's a chance he can improve. Now, the question to me is how much is he actually going to improve? Because when you look at a lot of numbers last year, towards the bottom of the league in accuracy in a lot of key categories. So is he really going to bridge that gap from one of the worst starters potentially to one of the best suddenly? Like, I think that's, a lot to ask. And I think the Eagles shouldn't be settling, especially when they have these assets next year and the 3 potential first-round picks, some cap space to work with, potentially a high draft pick of their own to do something with. So, I think Jalen Hurts is in a position where he has to leave no doubt. Like it's not just going to be good enough. I think if he's kind of just solid this year, he has to really convince this team that he's the guy. And if there's any kind of doubt, then I think they're going to look to pivot as soon as the opportunity presents itself.
Speaking of, Brandon, last one from me, and thanks for joining the show. And I want to see the BLG next time I see you. But
yes,
yeah, we had Mike Garafolo on yesterday, and I gave him a classic Jody Mack hypothetical. And I said, I think inside baseball, for people that I know, Mike is really plugged in to the Eagles organization, and you can do the math there. But I asked him a simple question. I said, if the allegations evaporate on Deshaun Watson, how quickly is Howie Roseman on the phone? And he said the water would still be wet. It wouldn't evaporate. That's how quickly it would happen. So my point is, if Deshaun Watson is clear and free and available next offseason, is there anything Jalen Hurts can do to be the long-term answer of this Philadelphia Eagles team?
Again, it has to be a situation where there's no doubt. Like he's just there's no doubts about him. I also think an interesting factor, even if there kind of is doubt about him, maybe from the building, is the players. Like if the players love Jalen Hurts and the team. And they do love him. And now they can't love him and the team wins 6 games. And that, obviously influences the team's decision making. But if they love him and let's say they win a playoff game, well, then I think it might be a tough sell to the players that hey, we're just getting rid of this guy. We're casting him aside to bring in a guy from, who has had allegations off the field, who wanted to leave his team. And I think understandably so, but still a guy who wanted to leave his team. So it could be interesting if it reaches that point, but I do agree with Mike, and I think Deshaun Watson is exactly, again, we're putting the allegations aside, which is hard to do, but just looking from a on-field standpoint and the talent, the profile, how would the Eagles not love to add that kind of player at his age on a reasonable contract, especially that you'd be trading for, who was arguably a top 5, at least top 10 quarterback in the league last year, despite everything that the Texans had going wrong for them otherwise. That's the kind of player the Eagles would love to add. I could see Jeffrey Lurie, we know he kind of wields some power here just a little bit. I could see him really wanting Deshaun Watson. And I think that's been out there too, that the interest in him has been partly motivated by him, because that's probably the profile. He probably sees a surefire franchise quarterback in Deshaun Watson. And I think Jalen Hurts has yet to prove that. And until he does otherwise, I think they're going to continue to pursue Deshaun Watson.
Last thing for me, BLG. If things go well, Jalen Hurts will be the leader on this offense. It's just natural in football for the quarterback to be the offensive leader. Everybody wants it. Everybody works toward it. It's 99% of the time exactly the way it shakes out. Defense is a little bit different. Your number one leader can come from a different position, couple different positions. Usually you want it to be the guy who's going to call the signals in the huddle. It's more often a linebacker or a safety, but it can be a defensive lineman. The Eagles' veteran guys are along the D-line with Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham. Is there someone in the linebacker crew, assuming Rodney McLeod is back early enough in the season, he's got veteran status on this team, can he be that guy? I think they missed Malcolm Jenkins tremendously last year because I don't think they ever truly felt that element of the leader of the defense. Who is going to be the leader of the defense in 2021?
I think it'll be Rodney. I think he kind of, though, like as you kind of touched on, it varies by unit. Obviously, Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham are really big voices in the defensive line room. At linebacker, I mean, Alex Singleton, I guess, maybe. I guess that's the guy there.
Eric Wilson knows Jonathan Gannon. So maybe.
I was wondering that. I don't know. And really at cornerback, it's kind of funny. Like Darius Slay, obviously the veteran there, but it's kind of funny to think about him as a leader. He's kind of a goofy guy. But yeah, I think it's Rodney McLeod overall, and really not just for the defense, but kind of the team. Like he's probably the most, vocal and respected kind of leader of the team, other than, Jalen Hurts, if you're going to say, because he's the quarterback and maybe he kind of, takes more of a bigger role. I assume he would, presumably starting this season. But in terms of someone who's been here before and has the respect of all the players, it's definitely Rodney.
BLG, have yourself a great Memorial Day weekend. We'll be on the site all weekend as well. We're going to try and get through the month of June, which is the toughest for all of us trying to create Eagles content with not much happening. We'll certainly be checking in with you from time to time. Thanks for hopping on with us today.
All right. Thanks for having me.
There he is, BLG, Brandon Lee Gowton, here with us on Birds 365. Jody Mack with Johnny Mack here with you on Birds 365. We'll come back. Got a good spot coming up next hour. We're going to head down south, roll tide a little bit. Details to come here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.